Hi, I'm Bridget, and welcome to my kitchen. When I invite friends or family over for a meal, dessert is sometimes an afterthought. To keep me on track, I have a stash of speedy dessert ideas that I turn to when I'm running low on time. I'll share 3 of those today. All are simple, satisfying, and can be made ahead of time or at the last minute. Today we're making the easiest rice custard, a coconut blender cake, and the most decadent butterscotch sauce. All recipes that prove there is always time for dessert. We'll start with the rice custard recipe. In my world, the ultimate rice custard has a silky custard top and sweet rice base. It's not to be confused with rice pudding, its creamy cousin. I love how rice custard is an old-fashioned way to use up leftover rice, and you can use any kind of rice for this recipe. We'll start with 1.5 cups of cooked basmati is what I'm using, but you could use brown rice or jasmine rice or just any kind of regular rice. On top of the rice, I'm going to sprinkle 1/3 cup of raisins. And you want to break up any lumps in the raisins and any lumps in the rice. So that is our base. For the custard topping, we'll start with 4 eggs. I'm just going to beat these eggs a little bit. And then I'm adding 1/3 cup of sugar. I've reduced the sugar from the original recipe. This is an old recipe I grew up with. It came from my great aunt. So I've made just a few modifications. And another change I've made is adding just 2 tablespoons of fancy molasses. And I'll whisk that in. And then a teaspoon of pure vanilla. And just 1/4 teaspoon of nutmeg or ginger or cardamom, whatever your flavor preference is. And finally, I will whisk in 2 cups of milk. Now I'm just using 1% milk in this recipe, but if you want a richer custard, you could use whole milk or even cereal cream, a 10% milk. We'll just mix that up well. Make sure there's no sugar or molasses sitting at the bottom of the bowl. So now, I'm just going to carefully pour our milk mixture over top of the rice and raisins. And that is it. I've preheated the oven to 350 degrees. This will bake for 45 to 55 minutes, but I'll check it at the 45-minute mark just to see how jiggly the top is. If you have a full-size oven, this should go on the middle rack. While the custard is in the oven, we'll make the coconut cake. Never in a million years did I think I'd be drawn to a cake made in a blender. It just felt wrong. But a blender is exactly what this cake needs. This happens to be a gluten-free cake made with coconut, rolled oats, and cornstarch. And the blender whips it all into a smooth batter. I don't do a lot of gluten-free baking, but I've done enough to know that the texture of gluten-free baked goods can often be a little gritty. You won't find that with this easy coconut cake. In fact, it might just surprise you. The texture is a little on the dense side in a good way, and it's moist. We'll start with the liquidy items first so we don't have any lumps of dry ingredients stuck at the bottom of the blender. First, we'll add 3 eggs, and these are large eggs, and they're room temperature. And on top of the eggs, we'll add a teaspoon of vanilla, 2 tablespoons of coconut milk. This is full-fat coconut milk, but really you can add any kind of milk to this recipe. It just gives it a little bit more moisture. Now on top of the liquid, I will add 1/2 cup of rolled oats. You can use old-fashioned or quick oats, but you can't use instant. 1/2 cup of sugar, and then 1.5 cups of desiccated coconut. This is the finely ground coconut or shredded coconut, but just in little bits. And it is unsweetened. Sweetened coconut will add too much sugar to this recipe, and it's going to be sweet enough as it is. And finally, I will add 7 tablespoons of soft butter. So that's a scant 1/2 cup. Now 1.5 teaspoons of baking powder and a generous pinch of salt, about 1/4 teaspoon. Now we'll whir that all together until it's smooth. We're at the 45-minute mark, so I'm going to check this for doneness. Now see, it does have that nice jiggle, but I'm just going to poke it with a knife and see the knife doesn't quite come out clean. So I'm going to give it another 5 minutes. Now that it's smooth and creamy, I'm going to add 1/2 cup of cornstarch and a generous squeeze of lemon, about a tablespoon worth. You could also add lemon zest to this, or you could use orange juice or orange zest. It just gives it a nice added flavor. Our custard has been in for 50 minutes in total, so I'm going to check it one more time, but judging from the set, I'm quite certain that it's cooked. Here, and the knife comes out mostly clean, so I'm going to set it off to cool, although it's delicious eaten warm. And because it's so wholesome, you can eat it for breakfast or a snack too. I'm going to pour the batter into an 8-inch round cake pan that I've lined with parchment paper and I've greased it well. You could also use an 8-inch square pan. It is a thick batter, a little sticky. And we'll just smooth the top. I've preheated the oven to 350 degrees. And this will bake for 25 to 30 minutes. I'm going to set the timer for 25 minutes to check it, which is nice and speedy for a cake. I'll confess that this final dessert idea isn't a standalone dessert, but homemade butterscotch sauce creates all kinds of dessert opportunities. You can drizzle it over ice cream or frozen yogurt. You can spoon it over store-bought angel food cake or plain cheesecake. You can use it as a fruit dip. There are so many ways to enjoy this sauce. We're going to start by melting 1/2 cup of butter with 1/2 cup of brown sugar, and to that we will add 3 tablespoons of fancy molasses. I'm going to stir that until everything is incorporated. I'm just warming it over medium heat, and I've chosen a pot with sides high enough for it to foam when I add the vanilla. And now that the sugar is no longer gritty, I'm going to add 1 cup plus 3 tablespoons of heavy cream. That's 35% cream. Still over a medium heat, I'm going to bring it to a low boil, and we'll let it boil for 5 minutes. So our cake is nice and golden on top. I did add an extra 5 minutes, so it was in for a full 30 minutes. So I know it's done just by touching the top. It springs back lightly, but if you'd like, you could use a toothpick to test it and just insert it in the center, and if it comes out clean or with just a few moist crumbs attached, then you know your cake is cooked. I'm just going to let this cool for 5 or 10 minutes, and then I'll remove it from the pan. Our butterscotch sauce has boiled for 5 minutes, so I'm going to remove it from the heat and stir in just 1 teaspoon of vanilla, and then I'll set it to the side to cool. We've got healthy-ish rice custard, a coconut blender cake that just happens to be gluten-free, and a richly flavored homemade butterscotch sauce. You can always squeeze dessert onto the menu when you have these easy recipes in your back pocket. Thanks for watching.